one man saying that is fine. If that's your opinion and you're not in it, that's fine. But there is an entire market of millions and millions of people that agree that it is a store of value. So, you can think one thing, but there's also a market, and markets tend to become efficient over time.
We do know that you will always get paid in Hex on a daily basis. And that is truly the miracle that we call Hex, because it is trustless interest, trustless yield. Nothing will stop that contract from running.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into the Creed of Crypto live stream. I am Bropo Crypto. I have here with me, as always, my friend and co-host Crypto Ewok. And of course, we will have in just a moment, there he is, a special guest tonight, the one and only Frank Molina. So hit us up in the chat. Like the video. We do this stream every week at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Smash the like to help support Real DeFi and having Frank back on the show for, I think, third, fourth time at this point. So welcome in the chat. We got Hammy, Scrubhead, DJ Moonboy, Valiant Low Key, and a lot more. We have a lot of stuff to get to. Of course, every time we talk with Frank, we talk about kind of long-term investing mindset. Especially the fact that here we are now in 2025, in theoretically the final year of four-year bull cycle for crypto. And it is January. We just had Donald Trump actually sworn in just the other day. Ross Ulbricht gets out of prison. All kinds of crazy stuff going on right now in the world of crypto. So, gentlemen, Ewok, Frank, welcome in. Frank, guest of honor. How you doing tonight, man?
Great. I just want to do a quick test. Can you hear me better? Is that much better or?
It's decent. I think we can get by. Yeah, I think we'll get by. So Frank, I mean, we're going to get into a lot tonight in the chat. Hit us up as well with anything for Frank. But we usually talk kind of like long-term investing mindset and stuff like that with Frank. And we just had, we just mentioned there at the top of the show, like Trump sworn in. We're seeing all these super bullish things, obviously, for crypto right now, like what his plans are with Bitcoin. Ethereum, obviously, has been kind of lacking throughout this cycle so far. I mean, that's been the frustration of many people. People have been upset about it and wanting all coins to really get going. But I'm curious, Frank, just to your outlook in terms of just like this landscape changing in the United States right now, where, we just had 4 years of an administration that actively tried to like push crypto away, was, had an SEC that, did not try to help the industry and actively tried to tear it down, including our own ecosystem. But I'm curious your thoughts on Trump now being in the White House, things kind of taking a turn for the more positive for crypto. What do you think about kind of the trade winds here with U.S. policy and crypto here in 2025?
Well, I've always said that PulseChain, PulseX, and Hex, there are like some sort of a derivative to Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin succeeds as a real DeFi, as the pillar for DeFi, decentralized finance, then PulseChain, PulseX, and Hex in due time will do its thing, right? The thing is that people want it to happen on their time schedule, on their timeline, and as quickly as possible. And I was thinking about this morning when I was reading a bunch of stuff on Twitter, and a lot of people get upset that it's not pumping as fast as a meme coin, or that the market's attention is on meme coins, and PulseChain, PulseX, and Hex are behind. But I like to think about it this way: you can't have two things that are separate and different operate the same way. So when you have real DeFi, which is what I consider, PulseChain, PulseX, and Hex and Bitcoin, those operate on its own spectrum of cryptocurrency, because that is decentralized finance. That is not crypto. That is its own DeFi space. That's what I call sustainability. That's long-term holding. That is going to be here for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. That is what everyone considers the boring stuff, because it doesn't move up as quickly, but it's the stable stuff. And the problem is that people want the stable things to operate the same way as the meme coins. And then the meme coins is what pumps overnight. It's what shoots up, immediately, is what does thousands of X's, 10,000 X's. And then, but it's not here after 3 months. And that's what really kind of irritates me, is that people want the stability of things, but they want it to perform like a meme coin. And those two things cannot coexist at the same time. Everything happens when the market decides it's going to happen. And when you understand that right now, meme coins and the crypto as a whole, it's 99% degenerate people. When you understand that it's a bunch of people who are just gamblers, that's what moves the market. So gamblers, they're not thinking 10 years from now. They're not thinking 15 years. They're not thinking long term. They're thinking, how can I make money quickly and then quickly get out of it? So then they want their quick pump. And then the smart investors, they're the ones that stay, or they're ones buying the dips. And then whenever they decide to reallocate capital to the things that's going to be here for the long term, like sustainability, then that's when it has its turn. That's why Hex has always been the lagger, because every single time people just go make their money, they're 20, 30, 40, 50x really quickly, and then they have capital that they can allocate long term. And that's the thing about the majority of people don't understand, that you can't have long term sustainability operate and pump as quickly as short term quick money chasing. It just doesn't work that way.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And that's 100% what we have seen this cycle so far. I mean, obviously Solana has been the main chain that everybody has aped into. And memes are memes, I mean, obviously some people love them, some people are critical of them, but I think we can all agree that on Solana, it's like pump and dump town, basically. I mean, like, there are memes that have been sustainable on other chains, but Solana has just been like the thing for everybody to, pump into real quick and then dump, obviously, including maybe the sitting president actually now. But yeah, we're just seeing that with Solana. And I think you bring up a good point, Frank. And we did see that last cycle with Hex. You're right. Like, after some of this like feverish meme stuff does start to die off here, which I think we will see over the course of this year, I think we might see some of that money flow into the ecosystem. And that's what, like, it seems like, based on Richard Hart's tweets the last couple of days, I think that's what he believes. And again, we did see that happen last cycle. So I'm curious, because obviously you're always long-term minded, but is that how you think it will shape up, like, as this year goes on? I mean, I know you're not looking to like sell your whole stack or be out of crypto by 2026. I mean, I know you're not somebody who thinks that way, but do you believe that the stuff with real utility like that, coupled with maybe some of the things that Richard Hart's doing in the background, is what will lead PulseChain to be maybe something that even goes into early 2026, when most people are thinking this cycle will start go back down, like towards another bear cycle? Do you think we could see PulseChain moving that late in the game in terms of this cycle?
Yeah, so from what I've seen on Twitter, a lot of people are saying that this, what do you call it? The narrative for this cycle is Colts and meme coins. Right? I've seen that a couple of times now. The problem with that is, if that's the case, then you're not going to see a lot of people have a lot of attention on things that are going to be here for a very, very long time. And during the cycle, when it's its all-time high, is when a lot of people, you have to think about it. If it's 99% gamblers and they don't know what money is, and they don't know what investing is, or they don't care to know what it is, they just want to make money quickly, they're not looking for the thing that's going to be here for a long time. So if that's the case, they're going to be chasing meme coins for the first 6, 7, 8, 9 months, whatever it may be for 2025. And then the people who stick around, that's the ones who are going into DeFi assets, the one that are actually going to be here for a very long time. Now, I've seen it from, like, in the physical actual world. I tweeted about this last week. I had a mentor who made his money on Bitcoin, and I was in his program, like his bootcamp program, his mentorship program, for a couple of years, and that was a couple of years ago. And when we left, he made it very clear: don't reach out to him, don't talk to him. That was part ways. Go tackle the world on your own. Don't rely on him. And I was in a group with other individuals of good friends of mine who I've known for almost 20 years, and one of them received a text from this mentor of mine who made his money in Bitcoin, by the way. And he said, "Hey, what's the golden ticket? What's the slam dunk? Is it PulseChain or PulseX?" So he's not the guy who's on social media. He's not the guy who's on, checking forums. He's not on Twitter. He's a regular old school, old money, traditional finance, traditional investment routes, your brick and mortar businesses. Bitcoin was just like his rocket ship that expedited his wealth. But everything else he had already established. He went the TradFi route. He went the traditional education route. And Bitcoin was just like that rocket ship that allowed his wealth to expedite at a faster rate. But he's not aware of the things that we're talking about, like on Twitter. But he has connections with people who work in Wall Street, people who have hedge funds on Wall Street. He has a friend who has a crypto hedge fund, right? He's based out of New York. I never met him, but he always talked about him and how he had his network connections in crypto through his friend who's a hedge fund manager on Wall Street. So that's where he gets his intel from. And it's very obvious that how was he aware of PulseChain and PulseX if we haven't spoken to him in years and he just reaches out to us one day? And that tells me the old money, the institutional investors, they're making their way in. And then the other day I was at the gym, I go to these what I call like upscale gyms where you have these older folks, old money.
Right.
They have their personal trainers. And then I was getting ready for a boxing session. And my friend walks in. He works out with me sometimes. And he says, "Hey, man, guess what?" I was like, "What's up?" He's like, "Hey, I just overheard this older gentleman who wears a Bitcoin shirt." He says, "Hey, I just jumped 100,000 into PDI." Now, whether it was 100,000 USD or 100,000 PDI, we don't know, right? But if it's like these older gentlemen who have like play money, because that's what he said, it's like, "I just jumped 100,000 in play money into PDI." And we were like, okay, so old money starting to arrive. And I'm seeing that literally through my own eyes and through my own experiences. People that have no idea what Twitter is, they don't care what Twitter is. So that's my personal experience of my personal confirmation. In the world of Wall Street, you go look and study the big players like the Ray Dalios of the world. They don't go to online to get their intel. They go out to the real world and they issue like actual business connections and networks, and they do these crazy things to determine their edge. They get their insight from what's actually happening in the real world. They'll send out analysts to go look at the inventory of certain publicly traded companies to see how quickly product is moving in and out. And that's going to give them their edge to determine whether they should go long or short. Like their intel comes from the actual real world. And that's the equivalent of me experiencing right now with these two circumstances where I'm seeing old money, older generation, people who've gone the traditional route, and they're discussing PulseChain, PulseX, as if like this could be the next big thing, or just an opportunity. Regardless of whatever way you want to look at it, that's all perception. I have my perception and my thoughts on what that means, but that's for the viewer to make their own conclusion. But that's all good things because it means we're on their radar. And once they're on their radar, it's just a matter of time until everything falls into place. The SEC getting dismissing the case, everybody's starting to realize that what's real DeFi, understanding the not your keys, not your coins. That's when like real institutional investors and start to understand this is a very, very similar pathway to Bitcoin. Okay, let's go and invest into this route because Bitcoin's already proven the DeFi route. It's already proven it. Like you can't deny that, whether you like Bitcoin or you don't. You can't deny that DeFi is here to stay. DeFi is the solution to monetary debasement. So then now people are going to look, okay, what is the next thing similar to it? And then we go back into the 80s, 70s, Intel was already up and running. And then Apple said, I'm going to make something similar. Same thing with Microsoft, Google. So there's always healthy competition for the things that are actually here to stay. Bitcoin can't be the only DeFi existent type of cryptocurrency that exists in the world. So people are going to look for alternatives. The real money, the real institutions, they look for alternatives. And in this case, currently, as we speak, the alternative to real DeFi is Hex, PulseChain, and PulseX. Now, of course, real institutions and real money, they're very precautious. So as long as they see that SEC case open, they're gonna be a little bit more hesitant. But there's gonna be those who are taking the gamble, who are like, you know what, I'm gonna go in now, because if they win, the opportunity for increased gains, increase their amount of gains is there, because you're going in before the market floods in. You know, I just have a very different viewpoint. A lot of the stuff that I say is very boring. People don't want to hear it. They want to hear the hopium. They want to hear all this like, oh, it's gonna do 1,000x tomorrow. Like I'm not that dude. I look at crypto and I tie it back to TradFi, and I'm looking to build wealth. And I'm not looking to get rich, and that's the difference. Wealth takes time. Wealth takes patience. Wealth takes, you know, being able to go contrarian to what everybody else is doing, but relying on your own research. And that's just how I kind of view my situation. I studied Bitcoin. I loved Bitcoin. I loved the problem that it solved, because it was a solution to everything what Wall Street is and what it shouldn't be. And when I saw the opportunity that this is another way for DeFi to exist, but to catch it early, I went all in. That's why I'm 99% PulseX.
Yeah. And we all know if any of us were to bring in a large dollar person, the last place we would put them is on Twitter because of it's just a toxic wasteland. I mean, I wouldn't want anybody exposed to what happens there. We've been seasoned enough to know to block half of it out, ignore it. There's going to be always infighting and people that disagree. But the one good thing that I do still see is that if somebody attacks the group, they kind of band together, right? I mean, there is at least still that solidarity for the entire ecosystem, but still the infighting. But again, my point being, you know, that's why they're not there. The big money, the guys that are hearing this stuff, none of those guys are hanging out on Twitter or in the back chat rooms of Telegram or anything like that. So, you know, we do have to understand that it's not the place for a lot of those guys to hang out.
Yeah, and like a lot of people don't have my ability to have the mindset that I have, because they haven't had the experience in life, right? I've been working in markets for a bit over 10 years. And when I used to do my research, you know, I did it extensively when I was looking at equities. But you have to look back, what is Twitter the equivalent of? Okay, well, we go back to Apple when it launched. Back then, they released negative sentiment on the newspapers, right? So it was, technology has always, human nature has always been the same. People are always going to be doubtful. People are always going to talk shit. But the people who do the actual research, they look past the surface level, and then they make their own conclusions and their own decisions. So we just fast forward to 2025. What is the equivalent? Twitter is just the equivalent of a newspaper that it was in the 80s. Yeah. And then the human nature is the exact same thing. People are going to be skeptical. They're going to talk a lot of shit. They're going to talk a lot of all this mess. But until it actually has confirmation, then their sentiment changes. You'll be very surprised. People are very emotional when it comes to, they have a decision that they made in their mind because the media told them one thing. And then all of a sudden, everything else changes because, oh, the green candle showed up, or the company has decided to go up in value, or they never failed in the case for Apple. But you take that same philosophy, those same principles, they don't change just because it's crypto. The same investment philosophy is applicable in the 80s to today. So I think that's my edge, honestly. Being able to look at crypto the same way I would look at a long-term investing stock, and knowing the fact that, oh, I just got to wait. I did my own research. If there's anybody I trust in the world more than anybody, is myself. Right. I don't trust Richard. I don't trust people on Twitter. I don't trust anybody. I trust myself more than anything. And because I trust myself more than anything, I know that the work that I put in to understand what I hold is what gives me that conviction. Because I'm trusting my own knowledge, my own research, my own intuition, my own gut. And it's never failed me in the past, whether it was a lesson or a gain in the past, but my own confidence in myself has never failed me. So from when people say, how do I have conviction? It was because I trust myself more than I trust anybody. And I trust that what I did in the past 4 years to have this conviction gives me the confidence to hold through the turbulence.
Yep.
It's really interesting you say that, because I just had that thought recently myself. Like, because sometimes, very rarely, like Ewok said, are we like doom scrolling on Twitter or anything. But every now and then you can get like this idea gets into the ethos, that you're seeing a lot, and maybe you're just, who knows what it is, like you're having one of those days where like you're hungry, you're tired, you're just not in the right state of mind, and your mind starts to wander. And I have many times, just like you just said, Frank, I've come back to that exact idea of like, why the fuck am I listening to these people that are objectively dumber than I am? Like, why am I letting these people have their way with my mind, or really my mind have its way with itself, because I'm letting it slip away, And you just come back to like realizing like I'm more measured than these people. I'm able to see a longer view than these people. And you can tell because the folks that live like on Twitter 24/7 and the kind of stuff, the arguments they're getting into, the stuff they're getting into, it's really just creations of their own, their own boredom, their own mind, really. So
it's a bunch of noise. It is noise.
Yeah. Can I ask you real quick? This is really interesting, and I don't even know if you've really seen that this is going on, Frank, because again, it's happening on Twitter, although it has been something that Richard Hart's actually been mentioning here and there. So your interesting points about like being in one of those, and I know exactly what you mean, like those high class gyms where older dudes will be there and like have trainers and stuff like that. But so you just brought up the fact that these guys are not on Twitter, they're not on social media and stuff like that, and they're coming out talking about buying PDI, guy being aware of PulseChain and PulseX and stuff like that. However, at the same time, we are seeing people on Twitter right now. And again, Richard himself has been engaging in it. And I think it was more so geared towards Vitalik Buterin and how Ethereum's not been performing thus far. And Vitalik's tweeting about their identity and what they're doing. I mean, all these weird tweets about like what's up next for Ethereum and stuff. And there's been this thing within PulseChain the last couple of days, people talking about like marketing, like we should have better marketing, or, Richard's tweeting about like, I forget what the phrases he said, maybe Ewok, you can help me out, but don't whatever advertise instead. I forget, it's a rhyme. I forget what it was, but he's just basically telling people to advertise and stuff like that. Do you think that that's a misnomer? Like all these people that are afraid, like, well, the prices are down. Why haven't we moved yet when some other things have moved? Is it like just a PulseChain marketing problem? Or is it just, where we're at in the cycle? Most importantly, Ethereum hasn't even moved yet. So how are many altcoins kind of going to move yet? And I know it's anecdotal, but the two stories that you just told us about older dudes that are hitting you up in the gym are talking about it. What do you think PulseChain actually has a marketing problem? I guess it's just what I would ask you on that.
So my viewpoint on that is very, very different. A lot of people are not going to like what I have to say, actually, because
there you go.
Let me put it this way. If people buy solely on marketing, already in crypto, okay? So keep in mind, you're in crypto. The crypto market is 99% degenerates. It's not investors. It's just people chasing hopium and chasing FOMO, okay? So that's the people that you're advertising to. So you're already eliminating investor, you're already eliminating rationale, you're eliminating critical thinking skills, right? You're targeting an 18-year-old degenerate person who can't go to Vegas to gamble. That's who you're targeting, okay? So when you advertise, all you're simply doing is giving them another token in which their attention might go to, and then they might dump $100 into it. That's what advertising is. You're trying to get eyeballs into someone to look at your product, okay? But that's not sustainable for any long-term investing. So when you have high marketing and all this bullshit you want to call it, and you have a whole bunch of people who come in and they dump hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they're not investors. They're just people looking for a quick dump. All that's going to happen is this. That's it. So you're going to get people to buy your shit, then they make a little bit of money and then dump it. That's literally what advertising does. So I've always made the argument, if it's real DeFi, if it's really going to be here for 20 or 30 years, you don't need advertising, because the product is going to speak for itself. People are the actual investors who set the new ground floor for the next price. They understand, this is a long-term hold. And that's not based on how many eyeballs can you get to it. It just naturally happens. You just like, it's like that in everything in the world. You see a lot of the things that actually have value and people are going to be here for a long time. They don't have to push people to buy it. It just naturally happens. And then eventually people develop a cult and then they do the marketing for them. Right. But it's what people refer to as word of mouth.
Yeah.
It's just credibility from people. You know, me talking about it passionately. I've onboarded people because I'm passionate about it. And they trusted my intuition, they trusted my background, they trusted my credibility. And like, I don't need to do the research. I don't need to go on Twitter. I trust Frank. Frank's done his research. He's done his understanding of it. And if he's in it and he's passionate about it, he's not convincing me about it. He's just telling me about it. Well, I'm going to go and dabble into it too. So that's how you actually sustain something that's going to be here for 20, 30 years. It's like when you have actual investors coming in and saying, this is the real deal, right? But when you have like advertising, marketing, it's no different than just trying to push a product into people who don't actually believe in it. They buy it, they don't like it, then they get rid of it.
Well, what's the percentage of those people, Frank, that you think do come in from advertising and end up getting that aha moment? I mean, because you've got to get them from somewhere, right? And, you know, we've been made aware of a lot of people that came into Hex, whether it be the postcards or I can't even remember. Somebody was watching a late night today, saw an infomercial.
That's
Crypto Heartbeat.
Matt. Yeah,
Heartbeat. So people like that, you're going to get them, right? But so what do you think? 1-2% maybe of that group stay?
So I'll give you some percentage in a second, but I always like to think about it. If the person that I know is going to come in here for a long-term hold, and they're going to think like me, right? So how did I get onboarded? It took me understanding Bitcoin. It took me understanding that to a very deep level. And then I found it through typing in decentralized finance on YouTube. And then Hex kind of like was brought up. But even before then, I had a friend who was in multi-level marketing that I've known for 20 years. He was told about it from a credible source that he was involved in back in the day. So all the people how I was on board and how I onboarded other people, it all came through someone that I trusted and they trusted someone else. That's how that's like long-term players. That's how it is. People who are going to be here for 5, 10, 15 years, I know this person. I've known him for a long time. I trust his research. He told me about it. Now I'm going to go and do my own research. Now, of course, you can get that small percentage of people through a mass advertisement like that. Of course you can. But I like to put it is, what is the percentage base? Okay. How much does a crypto drop? Let's say 90-95%. I would argue the reason why it drops 95% is because that 95% are degens. And the 5% that is above the low, it's that long-term hold.
Yeah.
You see, does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. And but each time, and that's why Bitcoin did the same thing, right? Early in the day, Bitcoin went down 95%. The next cycle, maybe only 90. The next cycle, only 85. And now we're at the point where this could be a 80% drop. So each cycle, you're going to gain a small portion of that mass group that see the big picture, or a lot of them they lose their keys and they can't dump. There's a combination of both things that happen, but I think that is kind of the goal of the mass marketing type thing. Is you're going to grab a small percentage of those people that actually do get it, that actually do see it, and they do stick around. I mean, if we just rely on word of mouth, it could really take a long time. So
it will take a very long time. But let me ask you this.
But it wouldn't dip as hard, is what you're saying. Basically.
It wouldn't dip as hard. Exactly. Yeah. So let me ask you this. When you see people advertising, hey, let me go do this mass advertising, do you think their intention is to obtain that small percentage of long-term investors, or is it to get their bags up for the cycle?
Right. I get it.
So that's the argument I'm making. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying anything about that. I'm just saying expect it that whatever advertising you're going to do, you're going to get a quick pump, but that pump is definitely going to come just as fast, because
froze. Right. I don't know if we lost him or if it's just temporary. Oh, there you go. You're back. You froze for a minute. There you go. I had a question for you. Probably the last thing on the advertising thing, or just kind of an overall statement about it, is you bring up a good point too, like talking about long-term investors. And this is why it's been weird to me, these people talking about like, oh, PulseChain has a marketing problem. I mean, Sami likes to throw this stat out all the time. I mean, there's 170 content creators. Like there's people like us that have a consistent channel. Maybe we're not always like going out and there's people that aren't great at this, but maybe we're not always going out and trying to find somebody on Solana and get them on the show and try to stuff like that. We're not DMing people and stuff, but just the fact that the content is out there, that's exactly how you found Hex, Frank. I mean, just like decentralized finance on YouTube, and then all of a sudden maybe you're just seeing that Hex symbol a whole bunch. I mean, that's definitely happened to me in the past, about like you see the PulseChain, PulseX, and Hex logo all together on all these different channels. You see people with it in their profiles. It's the mind share, and there's really not another community in crypto like this that has all these people 100% for free. I mean, we make a couple $100 from YouTube or whatever, but other than that, totally for free, going out and talking about this stuff just because you're passionate about it and you love it. And that's really, I mean, not only does that mean that the marketing is out there, I think, and it's out there for you to find, but also we've been talking about cults too. I mean, the fact that people are this obsessive over it that they're doing it. I mean, Solana, and I'm not like picking on Solana or shitting on it on purpose. I'm just saying because it's kind of factual if you look at it. It's the antithesis of PulseChain. I mean, it is people that, oh, okay, well, this one's gone up. I know what it is. Sam Bankman-Fried was tied to it, and I know all about that story and everything. And they're going and making pump and dumps on there and stuff like that. We haven't seen Ethereum move. Solana has moved, so people are continuing to do stuff on there. It's really the antithesis. There's not people out there, like there's not this tight-knit Solana community or something like that people are just sitting here every single week talking about this stuff. So it comes from the top down, in my opinion. Like Richard Hart, just how passionate of a guy he is, fighting the way he does, fighting against the SEC and stuff like that right now, instilling the principles that he has. That's why you get these maniacal people, I think, that are just here doing this. So I don't know if you had any final thoughts on that. If so, go ahead, right?
Yeah, I would just say, like, if people, the best advertisement is going to be people talking about it on YouTube, because it's like, for example, whenever I get a chance to it, I just talk about it passionately. And I give my perspective, I give my opinion, and I talk about it from my experience, and I talk about the solution that it offers and how it's people who understand Bitcoin are going to understand Hex. The reason why Hex took off in the beginning was because there was a whole bunch of Bitcoin holders. Like, people who understand Bitcoin are the people who understand actual DeFi. That's why we were able to correct 99% and still survive, because you can't kill the idea that actually works. You can kill an idea that doesn't work, or you can kill an idea that is only temporary, or it's a meme coin, or it's short-term gratification, or it's a quick pump and dump. But you cannot kill an idea that actually solves a problem, because there was always going to be that 1-2% who says, I'm buying up the dip, because those people are not buying for a discount. They're buying because they know the solution that it solves, right? So Bitcoin was the solution, and then Richard Hart says, here's a better solution. And people commented all the time on my Twitter. They said, yeah, the reason why people in Hex are the OGs, they understand Hex very well, is because they were once Bitcoin holders. Right? That's factual. Those individuals who are Hex holders in the beginning, they were once Bitcoin holders, and they understood the problem that Bitcoin solved. We're just offering a better way. Hex is a better way. So when people are on their YouTube channel and they talk about it passionately like that, I think that's one of the best ways, because they're not speaking from an emotional standpoint. They're speaking about it from like a factual standpoint. And then whenever someone like me hears it, I'm like, then we look at from a factual standpoint. We don't look at the emotions. We don't look at what feels good or what hears good, or, what we want to hear. We listen, we look at the facts, and we verify the facts, and then we make our own decisions. So the best marketing, in my opinion, is always going to be people like us who make YouTube videos, and you guys are consistent every single week. That's always going to be the best marketing, in my opinion. Because when you try to force things through just trying to get more eyeballs, sometimes you're going to attract just a vast majority of people, a wide spectrum, from gamblers to believers, like long-term believers. And sometimes it's like a hit or miss. Now, people have disposable income and they just want to go and drop $10,000 on marketing because they want to do it out of the kindness of their heart. By all means, go ahead. Right? But when you're asking like the community, let's raise $500,000 or $1 million to go do, something, some sort of marketing, that's where I'm like, no, I'm a believer that if it's the real deal, it's going to take off naturally. You don't need to push it. It's going to happen just the same way that Bitcoin. People are going to understand it, believe it, and then eventually word of mouth is just going to take off. Yeah. But it doesn't hurt. But just I'm not giving my money away for someone to go hire some marketing ploy. If they want to do it from their own funds, by all means, go for it. Right? But that's a case by case basis.
Well said. Did you have something, Ewok?
No. I feel that I feel similar. It's just the problem with today is people want that right now. They have that right now attitude, unfortunately. And it was one of the questions that I had kind of jotted down for you is how is there a way to change that overnight success mentality, meme coin adoption to a long-term thing? And is it other than time, right? I think time is our answer, and that's really all it takes, is seeing that we're still here cycle after cycle after cycle, and all that other stuff is gone. It comes, it goes, it may pump to the moon, you may get 10,000 14,000x out of it, but it's gone. It doesn't stay. It's not sustainable. And I mean, I think time is really the only thing that takes care of that. And unfortunately, the people that are saying, well, you got to do this and you got to do this, look how much we're outgaining you guys that are just sitting there holding. We haven't had the time aspect happen yet, so to prove who's right, who's wrong, kind of thing. So unfortunately, that's where we're at right now.
Yeah. I mean, put it simply, if Bitcoin hasn't been able to do it, we're much younger than Bitcoin.
Sure.
So like that is, whether people want to accept that reality or not, it's the reality. You can't expedite time, and you can't force people to change their emotions. It took the stock market 100+ years to stabilize at an 8% return, right? So just because it's crypto doesn't mean that it doesn't operate the same way. Yeah. Human emotions and human psychology is the exact same thing, whether it's equities, real estate, or crypto. That's it. That's literally, you don't change human emotions. And when you understand that, I think you accept reality for what it is. It's the red pill. You accept it for what it is, and then you make peace with it. You don't have to like it. but you accept it for what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like what you said too about, just the different forms of advertising where if you're on Twitter just blasting a bunch of stuff or paying for an expensive marketing campaign versus like the kind of grassroots stuff that we do, it reminds me of sales. It's almost like you're creating stickier sales, like when people are on here vouching for what they've actually experienced and putting their face on camera and connecting. I think it does a lot better than like just a tweet like, hey, I have 40K coming in this week. Which coin in the ecosystem should I plop it into? Which they, probably don't really, but that's kind of stuff you see out there. Yeah, Frank's mindset and traditional values resonates with Raoul Paul thesis on the TradFi world. Yeah. Totally agree. And I think we need more of that. I mean, like, obviously, like, we're in crypto and the prices are going to move quick and you want to, think in a crypto state of mind. But I think getting too focused in on that, like we've talked about here tonight, can definitely hurt you. What does Biffin say here? I think Frank is absolutely correct.
I agree.
About the marketing. Yeah, so he says, I think Frank is absolutely correct about the marketing. I still think it's cool donating $10 or $20 to the Hex postcard guys, not 10K, 20K, just 10.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like that's what I'm saying. Like, if you want to give out of the kindness of your heart and you're giving without expectations, you're just giving it because that's your way of contributing, by all means do it. I'll give $100 here and there, but it's not something where I'm like, oh, I'm expecting this to generate a substantial amount of return. No, it's just because I want to give in my own way, to give back to the community, to support people, whatever they're doing, their efforts. That's fine. But when you expect something from that contribution, that's where it gets dangerous. Because if you raise $1 million, now people have expectations on that $1 million.
Right.
That's what I don't like. That's what I don't like. Now, if you give $1 million and you don't expect it, you're just giving it because you appreciate their efforts, whatever. Cool, right? But you can't be bitching because you have no expectations.
Right. So while we're on this topic, kind of the same thing. What are your thoughts on the whole, all right, everybody send $5 of Hex or PulseChain to the Trump wallet so that they see this large amount sitting there? What are your thoughts on something like that? I mean, my opinion is they'll probably dump it.
They probably will. They'll probably, they'll look at it if okay, so it depends, because if the theory is correct that one of the Trump, I don't know if it was Donald Trump Jr. or Eric Trump, one of them, who's actually a believer in DeFi, then they might, be like, okay, we got their attention or whatever it may be, they might hold on to it. But if that theory is not correct, they'll probably just dump it. Yeah. So like, it's at the end of the day, I like to look at those things as like they're laughs. It's a cool little laugh, it's a cool little joke. But if you expect something from that, that's where it just gets very dangerous, because in the world of investing and TradFi and everything else, it's the human psychology. Like, if you really fuck up your mind when it comes to investing and you develop an expectation from whatever contribution that you're doing, and then you see that contribution didn't go the way that you wanted, you get demoralized. That's 90%. That's 90% of investing right there. You demoralize yourself because you eliminated, so you damage your psychology, and now you start making irrational decisions. Like that to me, like the psychology and behind investing is 90% of the work, man. 90% of the work. People just think because it's crypto, fake money, digital currency, it doesn't operate the same way as equities. It's the exact same way. The exact same way. Markets don't change. Human nature has not changed in thousands of years. Just because it's a new asset class doesn't mean you're all of a sudden you're going to have a whole different mindset or behavior. Right.
Well said. Brownie's Midnight Adventure. Yeah. Appreciate the super chat, man. Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you very much. I gotta hit on this. I think we hit on this every time you're on, Frank. You alluded to it a little bit earlier, but you've many times said, and I think many people may be surprised by this that are invested in this ecosystem, but you've talked about being 99% in PulseX. Obviously, PulseChain, Pulse is the actual gas token of the ecosystem. PulseX is the DEX that Richard commissioned of the ecosystem. And then, of course, a lot of people obviously are in Hex too. But I am curious, why is PulseX what you are the obviously most bullish on? I mean, I think maybe people have a lot of suspicions that, you know, it is deflationary in nature. Like it's the only DEX in humankind that has that buy and burn turned on, where we see the tokens get burned whenever trades happen. We've had 6% of the PulseX supply burned away forever already. That has happened really in the bear market. I mean, that's happened in the last year and a half. So why is it mainly PulseX for you? And do you ever, I know you're not a short-term guy, but do you ever kind of, you know, look at ratios or maybe go back into some Pulse or Hex or anything? Or why is it that PulseX is what you are most bullish on?
Before you answer, thanks DJ Moonboy for the 1999. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, very good question. I think my answer is pretty boring. The way that I'm going to answer it's not anything special. There's a combination about 3 things as to why I did all PulseX, right? Maybe 4. 1, the deflationary is very similar to my world of stock buybacks. Just very simple, right? I like the idea of it. It's very, very simple. 2, and this is a little bit more complicated, but it's the one that makes the most sense to me. To me, I understand what Bitcoin is. I understand. I'm like Michael Saylor. I understand the problem that it solved, right? But it's way too late for me to make substantial like wealth. I would have to wait 20 years to do so. So it's not worth it to me to buy Bitcoin. So then what's the next big option? Okay, well, that's when I discovered Hex. Hex is the second best option right now when it comes to buying something like Bitcoin. And it is the best option to buy it when the mainstream media hasn't caught on to it, right? So I was like, okay, well, Hex is, you know, the thing that's going to operate the same philosophy as Bitcoin, and I can buy it right now this early on. Well, I'm going to go ahead and start looking in that direction. Now, part 2 of that is, okay, well, Hex has been out for 5 years now, and can I make great returns on it? Fantastic. Yeah, I can. But if there's liquidity tied to PulseChain and PulseX, meaning if Hex succeeds, PulseX is going to succeed, well, then I can make substantial more returns by simply holding PulseX because it's newer. It's just been out for 600 days. Mm-hmm. Because if Hex succeeds, then PulseX is going to succeed because they're tied together through liquidity, right? So Hex already has been proven through one cycle and now going on to the second cycle that is going to be here to stay. It's a community behind it. The philosophy is the same as Bitcoin. This is just simply, okay, well, I can buy an asset that's only been out from day one, and I can get greater returns, right? Because if I buy Hex now, I'm buying it 100x above the low. But if I buy PulseX, I'm buying it 10x below SAC. And they carry the exact same principles of DeFi. The only difference is the ticker and a little bit of the tokenomics, right? But the philosophy and the ideology behind DeFi, they are both the exact same. Mm-hmm. And then it goes to like part 3 of that is I like simplicity. I don't want to have to, do I rotate between PulseChain, PulseX, and Hex? I don't want to be doing that. Like I used to be a trader. That's not the world that I want to go back to. I just want to buy one thing, hold it into, you know, my cold storage wallet over several wallets, and then go enjoy my day job. And then just let time do its thing. And not have to worry about, do I have to do a ratio trade back and forth? I use those as metrics to see the performance. Like I look at the ratio between PulseChain and PulseX and see how that's been doing over the past, you know, year and a half. But I use it as a metric, not as a form of investing. Now, people have asked me, is there a rotation plan in the future? Well, for sure, whenever I feel comfortable, I'm going to rotate a big portion into Hex and just do a 5-5-5. That to me is like, okay, long-term retirement plan.
Ewok will like the sound of that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I like to think about it, it's like you have the original generation, then you have my generation 5 years later, right? And then I like the Hex ideology and philosophy of yield. So I'm just going to rotate a portion of my PulseX profits, put it into a 555, and continue on with my life, right? And then another portion of that could be, let's say 10%, 20%. I could put it into a PulseX PulseChain farm, and then that's my active yield. Because you have your locked up yield, which is your 555, you can't access that yield. But then you have a liquidity farm that you can be your active yield. You can live off of that. So it's like it's the perfect combination of everything. I have my 555 stake, which is your long-term retirement plan. You have your liquidity pool through yield farming, which is your active yield, which could be your equivalent of like your rental property. And then you have your long-term holding, which is Hex, which is PulseX for me, with my baby is what I call it. And then that produced the other forms of income and other forms of investment through that same economical power. And I don't have to go and manage people's real estate and get the same benefits
Right.
as that. That's the big thing about it. So like my 555 stake is my 401k. It's an annual contribution. It produces yield, and I can't touch it till I'm 55. Okay. Well, then my liquidity farm is my rental property. It's producing me active yield every month, and if I decide to sell it because I need it, I can touch it. Right? It's not locked up. And then I have my main baby, which is what I consider my business, PulseX. That's the one that made everything happen, and then you kind of just diversify out. That's literally how I view things. It's very simple. It's very boring. It's not complicated, but it's what works for me.
That just gave me about 50 questions actually, but I find that really interesting. Like putting it into different pools, like if you do rotate out, say at the top of the bull cycle or something like that. I'm also curious too. This brings up a great tweet I saw from Gary Woods funding Jim. I didn't bring it up to you, Ewok. I'm not sure if you would have seen this too. But he was tweeting about, and I think this is what Richard Hart's been trying to do, is to build a DeFi ecosystem. We've talked about the PDI stuff in the past. We've talked about like him potentially trying to create a DeFi utopia where people never have to leave kind of a Hotel California on PulseChain. And Frank's kind of describing that idea where it's like, okay, so I've got my 5555 stake. I've got maybe a PulseX liquidity. You did mention this, but you could also do stables. Like if you wanted to get into stables, there is that stable pool now on PulseChain of the three main stable coins that you can pull together and earn a modest yield. Apparently it is like 8 or 9% right now, which is pretty great for stables. Not always going to be that.
It's labeled at about 10.5% currently.
Okay.
So
not going to be that high in the bear market probably, but just another, basically these different things. But Gary Wood's poll question was basically like, what would the percentage of yield, and he wasn't taking like Hex into account, he was assuming stable coins, but he's like, what would the percentage of yield need to be for you to stay on chain, to stay in crypto in the bear market, to earn yield on your fiat or your dollars or whatever you want to say, rather than going out entirely, putting it in index funds, putting it in a money market, whatever it may be, obviously all products that you're familiar with, Frank. And I'm curious, like, is there any part of you that wants to do that, or maybe you already have something out there to where it's like, some people may have a plan, where they're like, hey, I've been burned in crypto cycles before. I want to get the majority out and just throw it in like the S&P 500, throw it in an index fund, and then have cash to buy back in at the bottom again. I'm just curious if you are interested at all in using like legacy financial tools after that, or if you're really planning on being like 100% all on chain after that.
My concern about rotating into equities is a taxable event. And the thing is this: if I decide to rotate into the S&P 500 and then say cash had $1 million, hypothetical numbers, I'm not disclosing anything about myself, but I'm paying a 40-50% tax, so I'm giving away 400,000. There's not an equity on this planet where it can justify the return where I could get that money back. So I literally just burned 400,000.
Yeah.
Just because I decided to go into equities. What's the number for me? I'll be happy with 5-6%. I'm happy 5-6% stables, or not even stables, just on a PulseChain PulseX yield farm, 5-6% in the bear market, and I don't have to trigger a taxable event. That's happy for me, man. Because imagine how long it would take me to recover that 400,000. I leave it into the S&P 500. It would take me a decade to recover that.
Yeah. You'd miss the next cycle.
You'd miss the next cycle. So what is the point of me going and just rotating to the S&P to trigger a taxable event and then having to pay that $400,000 tax fee? That doesn't make any sense. I'd rather just stay, take the hit on paper, because I will take a hit on paper. But as long as I don't trigger the actual sell, the hit on paper doesn't bother me. And if I hit the actual, and if I don't have to hit the actual sell and I can generate a yield at 6, 7%, 8% on a yield farm, and I never actually trigger the sell of my assets, I'm happy, man. I'm happy. But people will not be happy unless they understand what's out there. And because I understand what's out there, because I come from TradFi, I have a greater appreciation for the 6, 7, 8% on a yield farm. I can appreciate that 7% because in order for me to generate that 7% in the S&P, I have to trigger a 40% taxable event. Then I have to rotate into the S&P, and then I have to wait 10 years to recover that 400,000, and then it's gravy from top of that. When I could just stay in the PulseChain network, stay in the liquidity farm pools, not trigger the taxable event, keep the paper loss, which simply just means hold for 4 years till it recovers, and then collect the yield in the meantime. I'm happy with that. Like, I'm genuinely happy with that. Some people are not, you know, but that's where greed comes in. And people develop greed because they haven't developed the experience in actual investing. Like, there's a difference between like being an investor and being like a short-term trader. And the people who are not happy with 6, 7% are the ones who are not investors. I am an investor. I'm very boring. People don't like this stuff, but it's what works.
Yeah.
Well said. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting pull, though, by Gary, because that's something that, again, you know, people, we want those products on chain. So just like you said, you don't have to, and even if you didn't take like a tax hit, like even if you just getting into those vehicles, like many people actually that are aware and smart with crypto know nothing about the traditional finance vehicles. You know what I mean? And they'll get into some mutual fund or a managed fund where there's like a 2% expense ratio and just get raked over the coals by these scam artists in traditional finance. You know what I mean?
So. Yeah, people like to talk about scammers in crypto. Motherfucker, you haven't seen the scammers on TradFi, okay? Like those dudes, just because they wear suits and ties and they have the law behind them, doesn't mean they're not fucking you over with their 2 and 20 fees. Like that's killing you, right? But
yeah,
you're not gonna understand it unless you lived it.
Yeah. I got to ask you about the PDI thing, and I don't know. I probably got to get out of here at 8. I didn't know if you had a hard stop, Frank, but because this may be an interesting one. But I've seen you, I believe, tweet about the PDI stuff before. You know, it's a narrative that we saw pop up, man, like a year and a half, basically. I mean, a little bit after Pulse launch, really, the summer after the Pulse launch, and slowly but surely, it's gained so much steam that there's certainly not a consensus. I mean, there's plenty of people out there now still that are completely doubting it, don't think any of the on-chain data that we've seen is indicative of anything, don't think it's kind of weird that Richard Hart, who goes out and calls everything a scam as soon as he detects it to protect people, has never said one bad thing about PDI or wrapped BTC on PulseChain or anything like that. I'm curious. So in other words, like most people are believers in what may be going on here with this thing. I'm curious where you fall kind of on that spectrum. And if you really think that that could propel PulseChain to like maybe unthinkable heights, because I mean, we've seen some of the simulations of what could happen if these mechanics are true, if we do get PDI to $1, how that could start, you know, a connection between all the assets where people are bridging over. You could see, I don't know if we would see PRC20 copies of ERC20 tokens reach parity and just what that would do. Talk about marketing. I mean, like that would be insane. But where do you fall on that spectrum, and how much do you think that could really bolster this ecosystem? Because I think that's what Richard Hart wants to do. I mean, I think he wants to, again, to use that phrase, create like a DeFi utopia over here where you can come here, do everything you need to do when it comes to DeFi. And I think what could be going on with PDI could be the catalyst for that. So I'm curious to your thoughts.
Yeah, so my thoughts on that is what I'm about to say is strictly my opinion based on the research and the facts that I look at. I don't look at people's emotions, I don't look at people's thinking process. I look at simply what I've learned, what I'm listening to Richard Hart, simply just factual research. If I'm right about PulseX, PulseChain, and Hex, about being here long term, 20, 30 years, which I'm trusting my own research that I am correct about that, then the PDI narrative is going to happen. That's just my opinion. Bound to happen. When it happens, I don't know. But I trust that I'm right on PulseChain being PulseX and Hex being the actual DeFi route next to Bitcoin that the world is eventually going to see, appreciate, and it's going to be here for 20, 30, 40 years. I'm trusting myself that is correct. And because of that, I believe that PDI narrative is a part of that plan. I don't think we get to that long-term sustainability unless we have our own stable coin within the ecosystem. So that is simply my theory, my position. I believe it's going to happen. When it happens, I don't know. I'm not in a rush. I don't care when it happens. But if it does, that is like the final missing piece to create that DeFi utopia. You don't have a reason to leave anymore. People can literally, like this, you can literally go, what is it called? Earn. So you could go collateralize your PulseChain, PulseX, create a stable coin, go rotate that stable within the ecosystem, go to the stable coins in the liquidity pools and create yield in the bear market. There's not a reason for you to leave. There's not a reason for me to go back to Ethereum. And then what's even the best thing about all that is Coast, is that if I want to spend my stables, there's a direct off ramp. I no longer have to go back to Ethereum, Solana, whatever BS chain is out there. I can stay within the same ecosystem that created. There's everything. There's a DEX. There's a layer one. There's a long-term retirement plan with Hex, and then you have your stables. Like, to me, that's the perfect utopia. And I think that is how you get to that 15, 20-year long-term sustainability is because you have everything. You have everything within one place. It's like a perfect shopping mall. You don't need to go anywhere.
And to the Coast point, you have a bank now. We got Old Glory,
right,
that is tied directly and super friendly. You know what I mean? Those guys, the integrations that they've done, it has been amazing. I don't know if people are still not trying it or what's going on, but if you haven't checked out Coast and what they're doing with Old Glory Bank, you all really should.
Yeah. I'm in the process of submitting my application to get my Old Glory Bank. You know, because that's at what point do you need anything else? Why didn't you go to a big financial institution when you have your own bank right there too? So it's like it's all interconnected to one another. But people are not going to appreciate the stuff that we're discussing until like they've gone and experienced the world for what it is.
Yeah. And
then they put it all together. Put it all together. You have everything in one place. You have your banking, you have your long-term investing, you have your yield, your active yield, your long-term yield. There's no reason to be anywhere else but here. Like if you really think about it, he's got the best of everything in crypto, and he's putting it in one place.
Right. I couldn't agree more. And, as somebody who has not used Coast up to this point to do the deposits, and I've gotten everything set up now, or got it in with Old Glory Bank and stuff like that. And I just really haven't done it because ETH gas fees to use the bridge have been minimal for the last year and a half, so it hasn't been as much of a reason. But now we are starting to see a paradigm shift. We're going to see that. Frank, you just mentioned about like having to go off chain again and back to Ethereum, back to whatever, Solana, another chain like that. That's what I'm thinking of is the future really is when you know, whether you are somebody that is like a all or nothing, I want to get out of the market completely at the end of this bull cycle, or you have more of a frank approach where you want to stay mostly on chain, but you know, you're going to need some cash outside, some fiat for something eventually. I think you're going to be hard pressed to find a better system to off ramp off of PulseChain if you want to get something in the bank than using Coast and getting into the stable coins and then just burning them and getting back into Old Glory Bank to get your fiat. Because if you don't do that, you're looking at bridging to Ethereum. Then you're at the mercy. You have to pay an Ethereum fee to claim your tokens whenever you get back to Ethereum. Worse yet, and again, maybe that does cost less than some of the even small fees on Coast, maybe. But then what do you have to do? You have to go through an exchange, which is like the most dangerous, horrible, disgusting part of the entire process. You have to go through Coinbase or whoever you trust the most, hope that they're kosher, and then you get it there to whatever bank you want to. So to me, if it is a slightly higher, even if it is a slightly higher fee to go from Coast back to Old Glory, if I can bypass exchanges, that is something that I definitely want to do at that point, you know.
Oh, I agree. If you have to pay a higher fee for the peace of mind, that's 100% worth it, because Coast is not custodial. That's what people are not like grasping. Coinbase is custodial, meaning if at any point by chance that they go bankrupt and they have your coins, you're not getting your USDC into your bank account, no matter what the circumstances are. And Coast, because they're not custodial, they're a one-to-one, right? Whatever they hold in their vault is what comes in and out. Whatever you decide to leave, or when you do the reverse, you're burning the Coast token into USD. Mm-hmm. They have that at their disposal because they're not custodial.
Right.
So like that you're eliminating that risk of being at the mercy of, like what you said, being at the mercy of an exchange to honor their word that they're going to give you what you decide to take out. And then it becomes a begging game. Can you please give me my money?
Right.
You know,
we've seen a ton of that on Coinbase lately, where people are trying to withdraw money for this or that, $10,000, $20,000, and they're getting frozen. And they say, well, we're doing it for your safety. We'll get back to you in 60 days to unlock it. So, you know, like you said, it's the peace of mind more than anything. Even, you know, I know there is a element of the weight token to reduce your fees. You know, we've talked about that before. We can go into that on a different show, but you know, it takes a lot of fees from, you know, 4% down to 1% or 1% down to 0.25%, depending on what you're doing. But it really adds up if you do decide to do it. So yeah, that peace of mind is totally worth that little bit of extra fee.
Not only that, but again, like I said, these ETH gas fees are going to get out of control. I mean, maybe they'll be a little bit more tempered this cycle. We've seen them be better here lately and stuff. Ethereum is apparently, you know, implementing some new things here over the next couple of months. But when they get up there and bridging suddenly turns into a $50 endeavor or whatever, it's probably going to be better for you to use Coast to get into the PulseChain ecosystem. Yeah. So, tell you what, Ewok, did you have any final things for Frank here? I'm just kind of scanning our stuff. Anything you want to go into?
I don't think so. I mean, we covered a lot of the, you know, the long-term stuff. Yeah, I don't think
because I had one. It's a little bit more of like a living lifestyle thing coupled with, and this is why I love your stuff, Frank, because I'm such like a minimalist at heart. You know, I would drive the same car for a decade, you know, take care of it. I mean, obviously you want to get yourself cool stuff. You want to have some flashy things here and there if it actually will make you feel good here and there. But I'm much more of a minimalist nature too. And I saw your post the other day talking about, you had a picture of you like in those Houston downtown apartments like years ago. And just talked about how you now prefer like a more low-key minimalist life. I think you talked about having a Toyota and stuff like that. Talk, if you could, about the importance of having that I don't know if you even want to call it like humble or anything. It's not really about being humble, but about being able to, it is a skill to be able to live below your means and have everything right in front of you. And for me personally, it's not only a skill, but it's like my peace of mind. Like when I know what I've got in the bank, the kind of money that I have access to, I would rather just be able to feel comfortable in my day-to-day life instead of adding all of these extra things to, you know, as a passive shiny object to keep the dopamine rolling, you know? So I guess if you could talk about your personal thoughts on that, and like why you feel that that's so important to you too.
Yeah, interesting because people who are the flashiest, they tend to be the brokest. And I can tell you
Yeah.
that when I took those pictures, my income and net worth are not where they are today. I'll tell you that
Right.
right now. So
Right.
it's funny, man. Like the more stable you become, the less you give a fuck about what anybody thinks. I used to like want to buy like these really nice clothes and nice suits, and I still have them, of course. But I've gone to the point where I'm so self-assured in my own self, my own quality of life, that I prefer to just like be like simple shirts, simple car, everything. And when I had those things, like I used to drive Tesla, right?
Mhm.
And like, yeah, it's cool for like 2 weeks. You see all the cool gadgets and shit, but then you recognize that when something goes wrong, you have to miss like 2 days of work. You have to take it
Right.
to Tesla, you have to schedule an appointment, and sometimes the appointments are not available immediately. And if it's like something urgent, then you're left without a car for like 2 weeks. You have to take time off of work to go to do all that, spend money on Uber. And it's just like super. And the thing is, like, with my luck, it's always been like something goes wrong at the time that I need it the most. So it's
Right.
always like that. And it just became like a luxury became a pain in the ass. It did. Like when I lived in downtown Houston, I lived it when the Astros won the World Series 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You think, oh, living in downtown was nice. Let me tell you, on that night when all of Houston is honking their horns and shit, like yeah, you can't get out of your apartment for like 2 days because they have a whole bunch of
Yeah.
parades and shit. And on every Friday when they have their home games, you can't access your apartment because the streets are closed. Yeah, it became a pain in the ass because there's moments and times that I'm enjoying luxury, but I got shit to do. Like those
Right.
things don't pay themselves. So I got businesses to run, I got people to meet, I got dinners to attend to. So whenever you have to do all these things to pay for that lifestyle, you're not thinking about the luxury in the moment. You're thinking, I got to get shit done. And when you're thinking about getting shit done is when the inconvenience happens. The car breaks down, or you got to take it to Tesla, or there's an Astro game going on, so you can't access your apartment. So now the thing that makes you money to pay for these luxuries now gets eliminated because you can't attend the thing that makes you money because the luxury itself is causing an inconvenience. And then that to me was just like I hated it. I hated this perception that I had to put out that you know that made me feel good about myself because I had to have these nice things to give me confidence. No, 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 no. When I became actually stable and I refocused my attention into the things that actually made me happy, my overall quality of life increased. So like instead of buying the expensive dinners and the expensive gadgets and all these different shit, I put it into like my health and wellness. Now
Mhm.
I train boxing and MMA. And let me tell you something. There's not better confidence that I've gotten wearing a nice suit than the fact now that I can beat somebody up that comes to my
Right.
face.
Yeah.
Like those
Right.
those are things that people don't really they don't you can't compare it. It's a feeling. It's a feeling that I'm describing. That confidence that you have, me being a very simple person, but I've invested time into my wellness and my health and the ability to be a combative person to defend myself and especially as someone who starts slowly accumulates, influence, status, and wealth, you're gonna need that eventually. So I just put all that attention and resources into myself, and that gave me more confidence than ever driving like a Tesla, right? And it gave me a simple piece of simplicity. It gave me a minimalist lifestyle, and ironically, because I have a very minimal overhead of expenses every month, Now I get to do things that give me world experience, right? And I'll give you an example in a second. Like the past year, I've traveled a lot because I don't have overhead expenses. I don't have an apartment that's tying me down. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have a car that I have to attend to. I have now extra resources to go and travel Mexico. I've gone to Mexico. I'm from El Salvador, so I go into El Salvador a couple times. And this past weekend for MLK, I was in Russia. I was in
Wow.
northern Russia. Yeah, I was
Wow.
literally in Russia in St. Petersburg, and it was an amazing experience. And I went to go treat myself. I was with a friend, and her and I went to go have dinner at a really nice restaurant in St. Petersburg. And it was an experience that I paid for because that's something I get to remember. It wasn't me clout chasing or making me feel good about myself because of my low confidence. It was an experience that I get to pay for, and I get to remember that memory. So like that's where I get to allocate my resources to, is doing the things that make me happy. And the fact that like how many people can say, yeah, I'm under 30 and I've been to Russia and I've been to one of the best
Right.
restaurants in Russia. Like that, not many people can say that. But I can say that because that's what like I can do with my resources now, is I get to spend it on things that gives me experience. There you go. Like he just said, buying experience is better than buying things any day. Any day. And I would 100% rather spend very minimal and spend on quality and experiences every now and then and have a fat bag of PulseX and Hex than to have a nice car in the driveway just because you feel like you need it or you want it or you feel like it gives you some sort of status. But man, let me tell you something. You attract the wrong people with that type of stuff too. You don't attract genuine people. You just become yourself. You just make yourself a target.
Yeah.
So like it's a combination of so many different things. And I truly believe you have to kind of get it out of your system for you to come to that conclusion. So some people it takes just 3 months, 6 months to go lavish, go spend their money. Okay, cool. To me, it took a couple of years in my early 20s. I wanted to feel good about myself, so I was buying a whole bunch of shit that I couldn't afford. And then eventually like I matured. Like it was really when I got into Hex when I was like, no, I don't need this shit. I'd rather just have like 99% of my wealth in here, live low key, spend my money on experiences, and then just nobody knows anything about me and I can live a very minimal lifestyle. That was
Right.
more satisfying than anything else. And like being healthy, being fit, and knowing how to fight, that gave me more confidence than anything that I would ever wear. And I think a lot of people need to get to that point. And hopefully, I mean, one of the things that I want to do with my accounts is like be kind of like a role model on that. It's not just about the money. It's about what you can do with the money.
Yeah.
Put it into yourself, the experiences, the traveling. Yeah, like Russia was awesome. I loved Russia, but um, I don't think people have this stereotypes
Hmm.
and what they learn about from what they read or videos and stuff like that. But I think none of that matters until you can say, yeah, I lived it, I was there, and I can tell you my experience,
Right.
right? That's more credible than someone just says it from theory. If
Right.
I tell you, oh, America is the greatest country in the world, but I've never traveled outside the world, then what value does that statement have? But when you say, oh, America is a great country, but I've traveled the world, that's why it's a great country. Like that type of statement carries a lot more weight because it's coming from experience,
Yep.
right? So that's just
Yeah.
like my 2 cents on that.
I think awesome stuff to share. Really well said. I resonate with you on the health and well being stuff. I mean, I've always been somebody who's very active and worked out, 5, 6, 7 days a week and stuff. But over the last year and a half, I realized like how much sugar I'm eating and shit. And always had a high protein diet and all that stuff. And then I'm like, why what my nutrition's like fucked. Like there's so many more things that I could be doing nutrition wise. So I've dedicated to like an all as much as humanly possible, whole food diet every single day of the week and stuff like that. Blood panels get insanely better. So I will say I only had a soiree with jujitsu for a little bit before I gave it up. So I'll probably have to get back into some of the fighting stuff. But The moral of your story, Frank, is don't move to cities where teams are cheating to win a World Series. That's really what my takeaway was there. You're not an Astros fan, are you? Are you an Astros fan?
Yeah. Not really. I've never been to their game. I've never been to the game, and my apartment high rise I used to live in was right next to the stadium, and I never went to the game.
Oh wow. Okay. All right. But man, yeah, so much good stuff. I really appreciate you sharing that. Great place to leave off. Ewok, did you have any other thoughts for Frank tonight?
No, just to key in about investing in yourself. It will pay tenfold, other than them buying things. So experiences and investing in yourself, you nailed it. So
yeah,
man.
Awesome.
Investing becomes a lot easier when you have a clear mind. I'm telling you,
right?
Like when you're healthy, when you worked out, and you kind of get that adrenaline from going to the gym or going to a boxing lesson, whatever it is, and you come back to the computer to do your research, your mind is clear and you think very rational. It's not emotional. Like that, people don't understand how important thinking rational and eliminating emotions when it comes to investing. That is like your number one thing that has to happen for you to make very wise decisions. I'll just leave it at that. So like you'll never go wrong by investing into yourself.
Not to mention being around to see the fruit of your labor. I mean, that's part of it too. So
yeah.
Good stuff.
Well said. Well, hey, we appreciate you, Frank. We appreciate everybody in the chat tonight. Valiant, Low Key, Brownies, thanks for the super chat earlier. PTGC, appreciate you, man. Bit Finesse, you've been active in there tonight. D Math, Volatile, Mr. Chinks, obviously, Marco, a lot of the guys that are joining us every week. DJ and Moonboy, thanks for the super chat earlier. Appreciate all you guys. Yeah, just an awesome stream. If you're still here and enjoyed everything we talked to Frank about tonight, please do us a favor. We'll say peg the like button. We appreciate you doing that. We do this show every Wednesday night, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We didn't even get into the SEC case and whether or not we'll see a result on it pretty soon. But who knows? Maybe by this time next week, we will have some concrete stuff going on as far as that, because I think we're going to get that any day now, it seems. So, yeah, we will catch you guys next week. For Frank Molina, Crypto Ewok, this has been Broke Boy Crypto right here on the Creed of Crypto. See you guys.
Catch you later.